Hi yogis and yoginis, Nick here again. So I want to show you another hip opener here because the hips are such a tight area. We're going to come into this posture from downward dog. So if you haven't ever done downward dog or you're new to yoga, you want to practice downward dog for a while before you get comfortable enough to do this. If you're comfortable in downward dog, then we can progress to this. Also, if you feel any pain in this posture, then please come out. This is supposed to be a hip pose, not a knee pose. If you feel any kind of pain or tension or discomfort in the knee, then this pose probably isn't suitable for you, either depending upon what your knee injury is or just maybe your flexibility. And so there are other hip openers that you can do to get the same stretch. So don't suffer through this pose. No one should be feeling knee pain in this. So we'll go over this in detail, step by step. We're going to do downward dog into sleeping pigeon, what I call sleeping pigeon, or forward folding pigeon, to open up the hips. So, again, if you haven't seen downward dog, please watch the downward dog video and practice that for a few times until you get comfortable and a little more open in that before you take it to the next level here. So, without further ado, downward facing dog. In downward dog pose, lift your right leg, coming up into what I call peeing dog. It's not actually called peeing dog, that's just my nickname for it because when my students are upside down, everybody knows what a peeing dog looks like. So, downward dog, lifting up your right leg, lifting the foot up off of the floor, opening up the knee, and maybe just really stretching up and back. Getting a nice stretch to the side. You can bring this leg back as much as it feels comfortable for you. Then you're going to swing that knee forward like it's on a pendulum, bringing it up to as close to between the hands as you can. And if you're tighter in the hips, you might not get your knee all the way up between your hands. That's okay. Before we go any further, take a look at my front leg. You want the knee in line with your hip, roughly. And everybody's a little different here, so you can play with that a little. But watch that your foot is over to the side on an angle. So a lot of times people will bring the foot right underneath them. You don't want to do this. So bringing the foot over. And then with your back leg, with my left leg, I'm going to curl my toes under and I'm going to inch myself back a little bit, pulling myself back. Now if you're more tight in the hips, then your pose might be up here. That's okay. Doing this pose will open up the hips. Unless, of course, you feel knee pain. If you feel any knee pain, game over, come out of this pose. If you're feeling okay in the knee, then extending the legs back as much as you can. So bringing the legs apart as much as you can for your body. And then either staying here, your hands just slowly sort of walked forward to take some of the weight of your upper body. If you're finding that this is really comfortable and you're not feeling much of a stretch through here, then you can start to come down into your elbows. However, I want to encourage you first to really explore the posture, because if you really bring your legs apart, you can feel a stretch here even just staying up on your hands. So when you get to the point where you no longer feel a stretch here, then come into your elbows and just resting onto your elbows. Eventually you'll be able to bring yourself even lower with practice. You may be able to bring your forehead to the floor and stretch your arms out. That comes with practice once you get more open in the hips. And eventually, for some people, not for everybody, it depends on how you're built in your hip joint, but eventually when this pose becomes even easy when the forehead is on the floor, which can take years for that to happen, but when it does, then you can start to bring this foot out a little bit more in line with your knee. And this may not work for everybody. This depends on how you rotate in the hips. So if you don't have good internal or external rotation, depending on how your hip joint is built, this may never happen for you. So some people have the ability to bring their foot up and come forward. Some people don't. It just depends. So if you don't like that in your knee, if your knee is bothering you, that's a sure sign that that is not a good option for you. So coming forward, either here, the elbows, or forehead, or staying up on your hands if you're feeling tight. You want to watch that you're not falling over into this hip. So notice that my hips are stacked You're not having a seat on your butt. You want to keep the hips level. Eventually this bottom cheek will come down on its own, but from the legs splitting apart, not from rolling your weight over. So to come out of this and trade sides, you bring your hands back into downward dog alignment, root the hands, curl the back toe under, lift the back leg, step it back, downward dog. Taking a couple of breaths here, just bending the knees, shooting the tailbone up, or maybe pedaling your feet to wake up your calves, and then left leg opening up, bringing the knee up. With your right toes curled under, pulling that right leg away from you. And either staying here or coming down. And eventually, if you have the flexibility, bringing the foot to 90 degrees. And then either again, starting here, when that becomes easy, coming to the elbows, and eventually resting on your forehead. But again, this variation of pigeon with the ankle and the knee lined up does not happen for everybody. And it sometimes has nothing to do with muscle flexibility and everything to do with just how your hip socket is built. So don't get attached to pigeon eventually looking like this, because no matter how many years you do yoga, it may never look like that, or it might look like that from the first time you do pigeon, just depending on how your hips are built. So coming out again, back into downward dog, rooting the hands, curling the back toe under, lifting up, stepping back, downward dog, bend your knees, shoot your tailbone up, and this stretch through your back, and then bringing the knees down, wide apart, resting in forward hero. You can hold pigeon, if you're brand new, I would say from 4 to 6 breaths. If you have more experience in yoga, you can go 6 to 10 breaths, and eventually you can even hold them for a minute or more. But you want to work into that slowly. You want the pose to start to feel more effortless before you start to increase your time. It's a really good way to open up the hips and the butt, which tend to be tight from all the sitting in chairs. So, downward facing dog, Adho Muka Kapotasana, into what I call a sleeping pigeon or forward resting pigeon, Kapotasana. Hopefully that's helpful. Thank you.